YouTube Vinyl community, Charli XCX fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens. We're joined today for List Monday with my buddy Anthony Fantano. There he is, guys. There he is. Hey. So, as we all know, Charli XCX's Brat album has been one of the most impressive releases of this year, or this decade, I'd say. It's one of the most incredible pieces of pop music that's come out. And this Brat remix album, as a lot of us have said, kind of it doesn't conclude, but I feel it continues the stories that she's brought up in these original songs. And I was like, let's do a top 5 of this remix album and see what we could put together. So let's just jump in.
Okay.
You're number 5, Anthony. What would you start with?
We're going back and forth on?
Yeah, we'll do jump back and forth.
Right,
yeah.
Right. I think my number 5 pick for my top 5 Brat remix tracks has to be, I might say something stupid, Maddie Healy and John Hopkins.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like Maddie is just a very funny kind of like genius inclusion on that particular track because we know his reputation for saying stupid stuff.
Yes.
But also like, just keep in context the fact that this is originally one of the shorter tracks on the record.
Yeah.
It's so tiny. It's almost like an interlude. It's almost like a little introspective detour type thought, but it's then extended into this like huge piano backed moody meditation.
Yeah.
Which, Maddie, yes, he does say his share of stupid stuff out there in interviews on the internet, but like he's also a very good lyricist.
Yeah.
And does a great job of like speaking to the exact same feelings that Charli does on the original track in his own way. I think it's also kind of important that we should acknowledge that like Maddie as a songwriter was kind of like an inspiration to Charli on this record in terms of like the way he references sort of like, either personal things or cultural issues in his songwriting. And Charli like was very much doing the same on a lot of tracks throughout this record. I Want to Dance with George. I Want to Dance to Me. I Want to Dance to Sophie, so on and so forth. And, I just thought he was a great addition to the record. I think the song just in terms of a vibe is a really nice little oasis in the midst of the remix album. And I think the only thing that could have made it better was just more vocal input from Charli. It does kind of turn into a Maddie song.
I agree. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, I think it's really awesome that he still kind of turned it into his own thing and made a great piece of art based off of her writing. It's still her writing. It's still her melodies at the end of the day. But he played off of them really well and kind of turned them into a totally different thing.
I think that's what's impressive about so much of this record is that the guest people that are on this record match the vibe. They understand the assignment. I wouldn't say everybody does, but they get really close. My number 5, I think about it all the time, which on the record, the original one is a pretty deep introspective song, but I feel like on this version it gets even more intense and more in depth and more brutally honest about juggling fame, celebrity, wanting to become a mom, the responsibilities of that. Things are taking off. You can't stop now. And having that super open conversation is like, it's a little hard to listen to because it's so vulnerable. It's so real. And no one is making pop music like that really is transparent.
Yeah, and at that level of fame that she's at.
Right.
In terms of like just being really raw and exposed in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, also like, you got to talk about Bon Iver.
Bon Iver, his additions on this song, like a lot of us were kind of thinking going into like, what would he add to this? But he's got a very ethereal, I'm going to say almost Peter Gabriel-esque delivery to his vocals in this one.
Sure.
And it adds a sort of almost spooky dimension or an eerie dimension where you feel it's almost like a soul crying in the background.
No, for sure. I feel like there are a few guest vocalists who aren't brought onto this remix album so much for their lyrical input as much as just let's add a beautiful, gorgeous, or haunting voice into the mix at some point. He's one.
Yeah.
Someone who I'm sure we're going to talk about is also Caroline Polachek.
Completely.
At another point.
Yeah.
And I would say those two specifically kind of serve that purpose. And in the context of that track, Bon Iver does it really well.
100%.
My kind of next at number 4, I would say, is Sympathy is a Knife with Ariana Grande, who I also think kind of, contributes vocally in much the same way, just to kind of make the song a little bit sweeter. Though I do think Ariana has her own little bit of lyrical input in there. And I think that she does make, Charli says so much with the features on this record. You could really tell like this is a person who I'm adding onto the track because they can identify with this
Right.
in the same way that I can.
They know
Or
what it's
have
like.
they have their own sort of angle to it.
Right.
And Ariana has obviously been at the point of a lot of controversy and hate and ridicule over her personal decisions over the past year, some of which she tried to address sort of awkwardly on her new full-length album.
Yeah.
I feel like this track for her from that angle is a bit more flattering, and I just love that this track also kind of like adds to Charli's also kind of like fear and growing skepticism of fame, and the way that kind of reaching the top and having your star rise can have a lot of people like coming at you, or looking for you to fall, or looking for that moment where you make a misstep and screw up and ruin your entire career. Really kind of like watch you for that make or break moment and hope that you break.
Yeah.
And, again, obviously Ariana in her own way identifies with that. And again, I love that we have just the right amount of vocal input from her. And then on top of it, the instrumental is a little changed around, and the song structure is a little changed around, but it still feels like Sympathy is a Knife. I think Club Classic is maybe a little bit too changed around to the point where that sounds even more like a 365 remix.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas, this still feels like Sympathy is a Knife, even though the structure and some of the wording and the way the hooks work is like totally switched around.
Yeah.
So to me on all fronts, it's sort of like a really successful revision. We're adding to the lyrical story, we have a cool guest, and we've switched the song structure and the instrumental around so much that it feels refreshing and new and cool. But all the old parts of the song that we loved are still very much like there and clear and familiar.
Absolutely. And for me, the takeaway with that song, which is also on my list later on down the line, is that Charli and Ariana to a degree has so much more to say about the subject that's still as vital and interesting as the original version of the song. But yeah, I agree. Ariana's additions to it are just enough, and you get a little taste of what it's like for her, but not being overwhelming. Like it doesn't become a Maddie Healy song.
Right. Exactly.
Number 4, I put Girl, So Confusing with Lord.
Okay.
Obviously, it's been out for a long time at this point, but it really is an impressive body of work to have people who may have been at odds, but maybe secretly admired each other, be on the same song and literally, as they say, work it out in the remix. Hearing her part is so open. And that's what I love about this album anyway. It's so vulnerable. It's so, you're in the veins of these people. But hearing her take on, what it's like to be a celebrity on her side, and talking about Charli and hoping to be friends with her, and the honesty that's shared, it's one of the most touching moments, I think, musically of 2024. Especially when you get to that line, "Yeah, I ride for you, Charli." It's kind of like, oh, whoa! It's like,
ride for you, Charli.
You feel it. It's like, damn.
It's really heartwarming.
Yeah,
It's really
heartwarming.
cute.
Yeah, dig it.
Okay, so that was your number 4.
That was 4.
Number 3 for me is I Think About It All the Time.
Yeah.
And I pretty much, really echo everything that you said earlier about the track. We both love it. It's just landing a little higher on my list. And really like for all of the same reasons that, it did for you.
Yeah.
I think it kind of like rode a little bit higher than the past 2 tracks that I just mentioned, because I feel like with the Bon Iver, with Charli's vocals, with the way the song is like kind of extended, there's like a real intense like drama to it. It's
For sure.
very theatrical, and I feel like Everything is Romantic, the original version, is really probably the only track on the original Brat that to me like kind of runs as like very theatric, because it is like very cinematic. The strings are huge. You know? With this being such a direct Y2K in your face clubby dance pop kind of record, there's not a lot of room for like, super crazy flowery instrumentation and theatrics and so on and so forth.
Right.
And because even those tracks, like I Think About It All the Time, that are those kind of like small, intimate, sad moments, they're so short and they're so stripped back and they're so skeletal.
Right.
This like brings that song really to its like full potential. It's flowery, it's gorgeous, it's extravagant.
Yeah.
And you really kind of get like all the instrumentation that should kind of come along with, an expression of emotion that big.
It's such
and that deep and that
depth.
sort of like profound. So to me, it just has the striking beauty about it that made it land higher on my list at 3.
I agree. I put 365 with Shy Girl number 3 for me.
Banger.
Intense. It's just the most concentrated version of an already chaotic song, breaking it down to its core elements.
It's like a reduction. You're just like boiling it down to like the sweetest, densest syrup
You're right.
from the original. It's like, you're just like boiling it down to that like bouillon
Yeah.
cube, But that is an honorable mention for me. But
Yeah.
it was like definitely number 6, and just because it does hit so hard and it is so fun.
It would have been lower on my list, but I put it up there because I feel like most of my list is ballads, but that one was the one that really stuck out. It was like, this is hitting you in the head over and over again.
Yeah, the ballads
so fun.
and more introspective moments for me were the ones that I feel like impacted me the most in retrospect on the whole thing. I mean, number 2 for me is Girl So Confusing, really for the same reason that it was for you.
Yeah.
Just because it was such an emotional moment. I feel like, this could trade places with me with I Think About It All the Time, because I do feel like the instrumental on that is so impressive, but even though the revision on the beat here on Girl So Confusing, the remix, isn't like really crazy or ambitious or anything like that, obviously it's like very much the same track.
Yeah.
But again, like Charli kind of changing up what she did there lyrically, and then Lorde coming in and really adding to the narrative so much. I just love how much it enhances the track and just kind of makes it a big emotional gut punch, and it just turns into a beautiful kind of touching dialogue.
I also think it's cool for people at that kind of celebrity to be as open with the world as they could be with just each other, because there are other celebrities who would never touch something like that, wouldn't even think twice about it.
Sure.
And I think that's what makes Brat stand out from the pack. But so that was your number 2?
That's my number 2. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is Sympathy is a Knife.
Okay.
Pretty much the exact same thing you said. I really enjoy how it's an extension of the original song. The fact that she had more ideas and more feelings and thoughts that she couldn't get it out on the first track, that it's almost an entirely different track, but the same identity, the same feeling is still there. And like you said about Ariana Grande too, like obviously she's going through her own stuff too, but I feel like her additions were good because they were minimal. I think if there was too much of her, it wouldn't have felt like the same song. But I like how it gets kind of chaotic at the end too. It gets kind of weird and clunky and sharp at the end.
Well, before we move on to number 1, I feel like one more thing to sort of, note about this remix that's really important is like Charli's, the position from which she's giving her perspective totally changes, because in the original version, she is the smaller individual who is seemingly anxious and threatened around somebody who's way more famous and popular than her, who she would never be.
Right.
And, we could theorize as to who that is, or whether or not she's like really on that level at this point, even with Brat having blown up as much as it has.
Yeah,
but still put her in a position where she now feels like that person.
Yeah.
I mean, she is like, having Ariana Grande and Billie Eilish try to hop on her album now at this point.
It's amazing.
You know what I mean? That's not something that I feel like would have just happened if not for this album being as popular as it is.
No.
You know what I mean? That's not something that you just get based on cool points.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, she's very much feeling like she's in that position now where she is like that number 1 person. And now she's having to wrestle with all of the stuff that comes as a result of that. And it's almost as if like this one person who sort of like, made her feel weird earlier on was almost like the preferable of the two problems.
Right.
That seems almost easy to deal with,
right.
Now that we're in this kind of new paradigm.
There's an interesting line in that version too, where when the press doesn't misquote you.
Right.
It's like your honesty went out there. It's like, oh man. I have a feeling we both share the same number 1.
Everything is romantic.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I probably agree with you why we picked it as number 1. Why is it number 1 for you?
It's gorgeous. It's these vignettes. It's like doing a slideshow and seeing all these memories pop up with these quick little images, and they're so succinct and so direct, and they really hit you. And I like that it's a conversation, and they go back and forth with dealing with, celebrity, fame, artistry, creativity. And that dialogue is fascinating, that artists who are in slightly different fields, but kind of the same field, can have those same emotions and they can connect together. But Caroline's vocals on this thing are insane. I mean, she's a great vocalist anyway, but it's like, you said it best in your video. It's like a cello. It's like you get the percussive rhythmic element that sounds so perfect. And
the notes she jumps from and jumps to like are just crazy.
Impressive
just, like,
vocalism.
With the accuracy.
Yeah. Oh, how do you feel about it?
I feel like it just kind of fully leans into the theatrics of the original that I liked about it in the first place.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like because of the overall vibe of the record, that's kind of missing from the original because it has to kind of keep up that tempo.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, it never really kind of lets up except for those very kind of tiny, intimate detours here and there. So it's got to like give you some kind of level of punch.
Yeah.
But I feel like that pressure was less there on this remix, and they decided instead, let's like give this song the treatment that reflects what it really is. You know, it's like this really dramatic, theatrical, like quickly flowing montage of like feelings and ideas and snapshots that are sort of like overwhelming, and we're getting just like glimpses of things.
Yeah.
You know, and I just like how kind of subtle and skeletal it starts off, and then the way it sort of builds from there instead of just like really kind of like going into it, you know? Like I feel like if there's anything that original track could have used, it was a bit more dynamics and progression, but like you really get like dynamics on the remixed version. Like it's, you know, the way it grows, like the peak it reaches, and the very kind of like small and subtle point that it starts at. It's great. It's a great progression.
It's a wonderful track. It's one of the best of the year, and I really love how they didn't go into like this hard, heavy, fast track that it could have become, because they could have done something so weird together. But I like that they took the complete opposite approach and changed everyone's perspective of what this song could have been and made something truly special with it. So I'm glad we shared number one.
You share number one.
Anthony, thank you so much for doing this. This was so much fun. And if you guys haven't heard the Brat Remix album, check it out. This was This Monday. My name is Giggens. That's Anthony. Go give him a follow. Go give him a follow. Pat him on the back.
Thanks for putting me on.
This was fun, man. Thanks for being here.
Bye.
And thanks for watching. Bye.